Our guest speaker this morning is Mike Ivey. Mike and Karen have been coming to the church for a year and a half now, and has shared things with us in time past and has stepped up to formulate this morning discussion group Sunday mornings at 9:30. So, Mike, let us know about happiness and the pursuit of it.
Good morning. I'm a little congested, so I hope that won't interfere. I've got my water bottle. Okay. Early in my relationship with a former girlfriend, I asked her how she liked her coffee, weak or strong. And she replied, "Neither one. I like my coffee just right." And she was completely serious. I soon learned that she also liked her toast just right and her eggs and pretty much everything else in her life. If anything wasn't just right, then she was unhappy. So when she ate at a restaurant, the food and the service both had to be perfect, or she would complain. If she went to the beach, the weather needed to be sunny, 78 degrees with a gentle breeze. If it was hotter or cooler or windy or cloudy, then she wasn't happy and the trip was ruined. I came to think of this as a Goldilocks attitude toward life, basing your happiness on the need for everything to be just right. As you can probably imagine, it virtually guarantees that a person will be unhappy most of the time, and that was certainly the case with her. But as I thought about it a little more, I realized that it's just an extreme example of something we all do. We all want some things in our lives to turn out a certain way, and sometimes we think our happiness depends on it. I'll be happy if I get a raise, or a new job, or a bigger house, or maybe a new partner. I'll be happy when I have children, or I'll be happy when my children move out. I'll be happy after I retire. I'll be happy if my health is good, my income is good, and all my relationships are good. Regardless of what the specific conditions are, most of us do make our happiness dependent on events in our lives turning out a certain way. We judge outcomes as being good or bad and base our happiness on these judgments. We create problems for ourselves with this approach to happiness. I want to talk about some of the problems and look at some alternatives. The first problem with this attitude is that we have a very limited perspective for judging what's good or bad. And I want to illustrate this with an old Taoist story. There was a farmer whose horse ran away. That evening, his neighbors gathered to commiserate with him over his bad luck. He said, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned and brought with it 6 wild horses. So all the neighbors came exclaiming over his good fortune. He said, "Maybe." Then the following day, his son tried to ride one of the wild horses, was thrown, and broke his leg. Again, the neighbors came to offer their sympathy for this great misfortune. He said, "Maybe." The day after that, conscription officers came to the village to seize young men for the army. But because of the broken leg, the farmer's son was rejected. When his neighbors came to congratulate him on how well everything had turned out, he said, "Maybe." We can never know all the consequences of events in our lives. If we declare something to be bad, we make ourselves miserable for having to endure it. If we judge it to be good, we give ourselves permission to be happy for a little while. But as Hamlet observed, there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. It's not the events themselves, but our judgments about them that make us unhappy. If we can get out of the habit of making judgments about everything, like the man in the story, we can more easily experience the events in our lives just as they are, without having to react to all of them. A related problem with our method of pursuing happiness is that it's based on desire. It may be a desire for something material, emotional, or even spiritual, but it's a desire for something in our lives to be different and presumably better than it is now. I think the Buddhists are generally right in saying that desire leads to suffering, or at least to unhappiness. Adyashanti, an American Buddhist teacher, addresses this problem in his book, Falling into Grace. He writes, "We can open the door and it could be raining, and we might say, 'Oh gosh, I hate the rain. It shouldn't be raining. I hate rainy days.' At that moment, we are in opposition with reality. Reality is simply that it's raining. That is what's real. If we argue with it, if we judge it, then we're at odds with life. In many unconscious ways, we're taught that if we don't argue with what is, then somehow we aren't doing our jobs as human beings. But what is the effect of our constant judgment and evaluation of what is? What effect does this have on us? Does it actually lead us to peace? Does it actually lead us to sanity? And most importantly, is it even true? Is it actually true that this moment should be different than it is? When we begin to open our minds, we see that this continuous state of evaluation leads to suffering. It is when we clearly see this that we can begin to have the capacity to let it go. So by wanting anything in our lives to be different than it is right now, we're refusing to accept life as it really is, and pretty much ensuring that we will be unhappy. Excuse me. A third problem is that any happiness that depends on circumstances and outcomes can never be satisfying. Even on those rare occasions when everything turns out exactly the way we want it to, we still can't really feel happy. In the back of our minds, we're always aware how temporary this is. We know that those ideal conditions won't last, and we wonder how soon something will go wrong. We spoil what happiness we have by anticipating it coming to an end. The fourth problem with our pursuit of happiness is that things that are being pursued have a tendency to always stay a little bit ahead of us. Have you ever thrown a ball for a dog that brings it back to you but stays just out of reach and teases you with it? You thought you were playing fetch, but the dog is playing keep away. Pursuing happiness is a lot like trying to get the ball away from the dog. The faster you chase, the faster it runs. If happiness is something we hope to attain when all the conditions are just right, we usually discover that trying harder to achieve happiness doesn't get us any closer to it. The harder we try to become happy through some kind of effort, the more we become aware that our efforts are never quite enough. If we start meeting all those requirements we have set, we inevitably discover that we overlooked a few, and happiness remains just beyond our reach. No matter how fast we run, we never get there. This kind of behavior is strongly encouraged by all those people who like to think of you and me as consumers. Consumerism is fueled by unhappiness. Is your present income not making you happy? Then you need to earn more money. Did all the expensive junk you bought last year not make you happy? Then you need to buy more junk. If whatever you're doing isn't making you happy, you just need to do more of it. But you will never get the ball by chasing the dog. You have to stop and wait for the dog to come to you. Yet another problem with our pursuit of happiness is that it prevents us from fully appreciating what we do have. Rabbi Hyman Shakhtel said, "Happiness is not having what you want, but wanting what you have. Or if you prefer Dale Carnegie's version, success is getting what you want, happiness is wanting what you get. As long as we remain focused on what we want that will make us happy, we tend to overlook everything in our lives that could be making us happy right now. There's a strong relationship between gratitude and happiness. Many spiritual teachers, as well as psychologists, have told us that we will never be happy if we're not grateful for what we have. Gratitude instantly changes the glass from half empty to half full. It opens our hearts and lightens our worries. As Melody Beatty said, gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It turns what we have into enough and more. It turns denial into acceptance, chaos to order, confusion to clarity. It can turn a meal into a feast, a house into a home, a stranger into a friend. So the simple act of appreciating what we have in our lives right now is a big step toward happiness. And the final, most fundamental problem with pursuing happiness is that we can only pursue something we don't already have. By making our happiness a goal we're working toward, we deny that we already have it. Adyashanti says, we look to everything in life to make us happy, not realizing that happiness is at our very core. It's natural to our being. There is no way to become happy. We simply need to stop doing the things that make us unhappy. I'm going to repeat that because I think Adyashanti is right, and this is the real key to happiness. There's no way to become happy. We simply need to stop doing the things that make us unhappy. If we can stop judging the events in our lives, stop demanding that things turn out a certain way, stop wanting what we don't have, and stop looking outside ourselves for happiness, we might learn to accept and appreciate life just as it is. We might find the happiness that is our true nature. In her book, Everyday Sacred, Sue Bender uses the image of a monk going out each morning with his empty begging bowl, gratefully accepting whatever is put into it as his nourishment for the day. If we could begin each day with an empty bowl, without demands or desires or expectations, being thankful for whatever we receive that day, I'm pretty sure we would be happier. When I lived in Corvallis, Oregon, there were quite a few homeless men who spent the summers in one of the large wooded parks along the river. And I would sometimes see them when I walked my dogs. I particularly remember one man in his late 20s with long, straggly blonde hair, bad teeth, worn-out shoes, and his few possessions in a bundle hanging from his shoulder. The reason I remember him is that he seemed to be one of the happiest people I've ever met. He was always smiling, always cheerful, apparently enjoying his life to the fullest. I guess I envied him a little. I want to end with an old Zen story from the book Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. I like this story because I feel like I learn a lot from it, but I can't say exactly what I've learned, which makes it an excellent Zen story. Ryokan lived the simplest kind of life in a little hut at the foot of a mountain. One evening, a thief visited the hut, only to discover there was nothing in it to steal. Ryokan returned and caught him. "You may have come a long way to visit me," he told the prowler, "and you should not return empty-handed. Please take my clothes as a gift." The thief was bewildered. He took the clothes and slunk away. Ryokan sat naked, watching the moon. "Poor fellow," he mused. "I wish I could give him this beautiful moon." Thank you.